Yeah, will Storsalen quiet down, please? The meeting is set. Welcome to Samfundsmøte, Brexit. Brexit has been hanging over Europe ever since 2016, when 51.9% of Brits voted to leave the European Union. Now, 2 years and nine months later, the final decision is about to be made. Originally, Brexit was supposed to happen on March 29th, which is about a week from now, but only a couple of days ago, a request by Theresa May to postpone the British exit was granted by the EU. So what happens next? Will the House of Commons vote on the same deal May has brought to the table twice, a third time? And in that case, will it finally pass? If not, what happens if the UK leaves the EU with a no deal? What does the future of Britain and the EU look like? And what political steps are needed to achieve the best solution for all parties? And maybe most importantly, how much more expensive will it be to go to London for a weekend? With us tonight to discuss this complicated topic, we have the British ambassador to Norway, Richard Wood, political journalist, host of several political news programs for the NRK, and former London correspondent Espen Aas, as well as journalist and first Norwegian female correspondent to London, and former host of foreign policy program Urix, Annette Groth. My name is Eirik Sande, and I will be the chairman for the meeting.
And my name is Sigrid Bergsang Lakså, and I am the secretary of the meeting. The board proposes the following agenda. Point 1, meeting is set. Point 2, board's protocol. Point 3, political 5 minutes. Point 4, orientation from the Committee for the Expansion of the Student Society's building. Point 5, introduction by Annette Groth. Point 6, introduction by Espen Aas. Point 7, introduction by Richard Wood. Point 8, sofa chat with questions from the hall. Point 9, break. Point 10, continued sofa chat with questions from the hall. Point 11, presentation of the new board at Samfundet. Point 12, any other business. Point 13, meeting feedback. And point 14, the meeting is adjourned. Please note that the point 11 has been added after the initial agenda was made public, and that the following points therefore have been shifted. During this, Frida Jerve will present the members of her board who will take over on May 17th. This is not only meant to be a presentation, but also a confirmation, where Storsalen will get to know them a bit, as well as get a chance to ask the board members direct questions. Can Storsalen approve the proposal? Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to the meeting's political 5 minutes, where we invite everyone to speak freely on a political topic of their choice. Are there here any expressions? Yes?
Ærede Storsal. My name is Sigrun Høgdal Hitland, and I'm a member. I want to talk a little bit about university democracy. Globally, you see a tendency that the business model seeps into academia and the university. In, for example, the UK, which is going to talk about more, you see this in rising student fees. Other places, you see it in weakening of the democracy. I think student fees in Norway is not a big problem. It's not a critical issue right now, but democracy is. You see that people want a strong leadership. At the same time, we don't talk about how this strong leadership will directly affect the democracy and also the student voice. I think this is important discussions to have. You see that also at NTNU. It was a report by Forskerforbundet that was out in January. There you saw that the NTNU was quite low on the openness of the cases that were put forward in the different levels of the power structures. So you saw that it was a low level of openness on the higher levels. I think this is something we have to constantly fight for as students, because we are often the ones that are affected if our voice aren't heard. This is one of the reasons that I want to present my candidacy for the student role in the board at NTNU. There are 5 other candidates that you can read more about at studentvalget.no. It's not in English, but it's Norwegian. Google Translate. Yes. And then I just advise everyone to vote when the time comes from the 2nd to the 11th of April. Yes. Thank you.
Ærede storsal, I am Eivind Rindal, and I am a member. Democracy, as we heard in the here, is very important. And one of the most important parts of democracy is the freedom of speech. Also, to uphold a public debate in a country is very, very important. And it should be every government's key task to actually support public debate instead of trying to harass it and pressure it out and keep it silent. In Norway, we are proud to be an open and democratic country. However, in our government, a majority government, there is a right-wing populist party that has a tendency to try to make people silent. If it's theaters and artists that are against them, they are threatened to get no money from the government. If there are young activist leaders campaigning for climate change, against climate change, okay, we do not want to meet them in debate. We harass them on Facebook. But when they actually are invited to NRK, to Politisk Kvarter and Dagsnytt 18, Helgheim refused to actually talk with one of the activists, ignoring her and ignoring what several thousand Norwegian kids, youth, and young students have been saying over the last weeks. We need to open our eyes to what's going on. However, more important here, I think, at the moment is actually that we address this issue of not actually supporting the public debate, but that actually we have a party in Norway, in government, that actually in some way are obstructing the public debate, are threatening artists, and in so, I would say, are using the same methods we see in Turkey, in Venezuela, and a lot of other countries we do not like to be put on the side with. Of course, FRP is not using the more violent ways, and they have not been able, I think, and will not be able to change the laws. But the way we have seen, especially at the issue around black box theater, it is very close to what we can see in states that are not democratic. I think it's very important that we see it and that we actually talk about it. And of course, in 2.5 years' time, vote them out of government. In a way, every democratic society should not allow undemocratic parties in government. So this is my message for you tonight.
Okay, so the political 5 minutes are up. Before we get on with the introductions from our guests, we will hear from the committee for the expansion of the Student Society's building. I think it's Gabriel and Live who will talk. Please give them a warm welcome.
Ærede storsal, mitt navn Gabriel Kvikstad. First to the financials. We hope to get in about 150 million kroners we'll hope they will be here around summertime. Things are going good. The Welfare Council is saying they will support us. The NTNU Student Council says they will support us. We have a good dialogue with both the municipality, the university, and the government. So we have positive signs, and I'd say we're at schedule. And now I need to start in Norwegian, so sorry for that for those of you who are English. 66 år siden det nå at nybygg skulle tre til. Så har det gått 66 år, men i 2017 så startet det helt på nytt igjen for 100. gang med en papptallerken oppe i hovedbygget på NTNU. Det var rektor som hadde sagt at hele området deres bare gelé av kvikkleire. Vi vil ha park der. Så sa studentene at det kan vi ikke godta. Vi tok et møte med disse oppe på NTNU i hovedbygget, og de hadde en flokk med geoteknikere rundt seg som skulle fortelle hvor skrekkelig det var. Men så begynte en av dem å summe litt utenfor sitt mandat og sa at, vel, hvis vi bare gjør litt sånn, legger litt stein i Nidelva, vis-à-vis Nidarosdomen, da kan vi se om vi kan få til noe. NTNU synes at nei, det kommer aldri til å gå, men studentene ga ikke opp. Jeg var så heldig i 27. september 2017, så ble min stilling formalisert, som før hadde vært sekretær/prosjektleder, har jeg lest i dag, ble formalisert som prosjektleder for nybygg. Siden da så har jeg jobbet med stein i Nidelva. Jeg har møtt rektor flere ganger som har sagt dette får dere aldri til. Vi har i hvert fall ikke innen den tidsfristen vi har satt oss. Jeg har snakket med ordføreren. Jeg har sammen med ulike ledere av Studentersamfunnet, inkludert Eirik, inkludert Sigrid, som har bidratt enormt til denne prosessen, fått lov til å jobbe med dette her. Men det er en tid for alt, og tiden har nå kommet for meg til å tre av. Jeg kommer fremdeles til å jobbe litt med finansiering, siden vi ikke er helt i mål enda, men selve prosjektet skal nå overlates i andre hender. Det har vært en fantastisk reise, og jeg må takke alle de som har vært med meg på denne reisen, og som jeg har fått lov til å jobbe med. Det er helt utrolig, og det finnes ikke noe vakrere prosjekt å jobbe med i hele Norge enn å gjøre denne salen til det stedet, og dette huset til det stedet der studentenes stemme skal runge fra i 10 år og århundrer frem i tid. Jeg er helt sikker på at de to som kommer etter meg, og flere, kommer til å gjøre denne oppgaven helt eksepsjonelt. Så jeg vil bare takke de som har vært med. Jeg vil takke Storsalen, og jeg vil takke Studentersamfunnet for å ha fått lov til å bidra med min tid og mitt engasjement inn til dette her. Det har betydd svært, svært mye for meg. Så nå er det sånn at jeg skal pakke opp denne pakken. Fra Nidelva har vi kommet, og til Nidelva skal vi gå. Denne her er da fra elva, og den skal opp i nybygg. Det er vår nye prosessleder som vil bestemme hvordan eller om denne her får et bygg å være inne i. Det er nybyggkomiteen som skal finne ut hvor denne steinen skal ligge, og det er Profil som skal finne ut hvordan denne steinen skal se ut. Så tusen, tusen, tusen takk for meg.
Ærede Storsal, mitt navn Live, og jeg medlem. Jeg også den nye lederen for nybyggkomiteen. Og først så må jeg bare si tusen takk til Gabriel. Vi hadde aldri kommet dit vi nå, uten deg. Nå som vi inne i en ny fase, så får nybyggkomiteen nye oppgaver. Vår rolle herfra blir å ivareta brukerperspektivet, og sørge for at vi får et bygg som fungerer så godt som mulig for medlemmene og for de frivillige som jobber her. Vi sitter i daglighallen hver torsdag fra 8 til 10, så kom og snakk med oss hvis det noe dere lurer på, noe som bekymrer dere, eller hvis dere har forslag til nybygg, for da har vi veldig lyst til å høre det. Vi leverer brukerperspektivet videre til den nye prosesslederen, Gustav. Vi så fornøyde med at vi har fått en prosessleder for prosjektet, og vi gleder oss veldig til å jobbe videre med deg, Gustav. Takk.
Hei, det jo kjekt at jeg kan vise fram ansiktet mitt også, noe som jeg har fått meg jobb. Jeg har blitt ansatt da, på Samfunnet som prosessleder, som jeg kaller det. Det en slags intern koordinator for både gjenger og kunder, og skal koble opp mot arkitekter og finansstyr, ikke minst. Så det en måte å prøve å samle inn alle behovene og ønskene deres og interessene deres, ikke minst, og få laget et så bredt kunnskapsbasis, sånn at samfunnet kan ta gode avgjørelser på det nybygget som skal komme. I den gangen i det prosjektet her, så håper jeg på at, eller sikter på også, at det skal være en så åpen og demokratisk prosess som mulig. Jeg håper på å få informert dere om masse nytt og masse fremskritt, både til nybyggkomiteen som kan legge fram forskjellige ting over milesteiner som er gjort i prosjektet, og så videre. Og samtidig, jo åpnere vi får denne prosessen, jo mer effektivt blir det også ved at dere, både kunder, frivillige og medlemmer og alt mulig rart, kan gi virkningsfulle innspill til retningen nybygget skal gå. Så til syvende og sist så både deres frivillige medlemmene sin ressurs, så det bare å bruke meg. Jeg har fått meg en mail på prosessleder@samfundet.no, så hvis du har lyst til å si noe om det, så er det bare å sende meg en melding. Ellers enn det, i den fremdriftsplanen som prosjektet har i dag, den har blitt endret litt, for at man ble treg med å ansette meg, så den planen som ble lagt frem under det vedtaket i Storsalen med det romprogrammet der, det blir utsatt litt, men en ny legges nok frem når den mer satt av finansstyret og arkitekter. Vi uansett inn i en sånn skisseprosjektfase, med mye pingpong frem og tilbake med arkitekter og folk som skal ha noe å si på tegningene de lager. Så i den forstand så skal jeg sette ned brukergrupper, der jeg prøver å involvere så mange av dere som mulig, og på en så effektiv måte som mulig, der jeg håper på å få gått gjennom detaljløsninger og finne gode avgjørelser der. Det var det. Takk.
Remember the rock. Okay, thank you to the committee. Seeing as there doesn't seem to be any questions, we will move on to our first introduction of the evening, which will be given by Annette Groth, former NRK correspondent to London. Please give her a warm welcome.
I lived in London for more than 9 years, traveling all around the British Isles as a correspondent, as you said. And the question I think I got the most was, what's it like to be outside the EU, your little country? And I said, it's fine. We have oil, so we managed quite well. But there was a lot of interest in the EU. Many were skeptical. And I had the feeling that quite a lot of people didn't know many facts about the EU as well. So I just wonder, what did he think, David Cameron, in January 2013, when he was, I think he was in Brussels, and announced that Britain was going to have an EU referendum. And of course, I don't know him, and I didn't get the opportunity to ask him, but I think he must have thought something like, this will keep the rows out of my party, because everyone knew that the Conservative Party in Britain was split on the EU. It had been since Margaret Thatcher's time in the least, and there he was. And I thought Cameron was thinking, okay, if we have a referendum now, and the people say yes, and then I can say, when they start again, I can say, well, the people have talked, so shut up. We're going to move on. Well, I'm not sure he thought that, but I'm quite sure he thought that. And a guy from the Norwegian Foreign Ministry who was in Brussels at that time in 2013, he said to his British colleagues, well, oops, what's going to happen now? What happens if there's a no? And he said to me that everyone told him that there's going to be a yes, so that's no question. Well, we were all surprised, or many of us were surprised. I was in London on the referendum day, commenting on the Norwegian broadcasting. 23rd of June, as you might remember. And we were standing there, and the polls were very close. But when I went to bed at around 12 English time, I thought it was a yes. And then when I woke up 4 or 5 hours later, it was a no. And there was a big surprise. I think it has all ended in a mess, at least chaos. Well, we have to see what happens in the next few weeks and months, but it has been chaotic. The one person who stood up and said, I'm taking the responsibility, was Theresa May. And there's been lots of bad things said about her, but I think she has been, or I have a lot of respect for her, because she stood there. And, I mean, the wind was blowing from all directions, and she took the responsibility, and she has kept taking it. It hasn't been easy, as you know. They've been angry with her here, there, and everywhere, in the EU, in the Parliament, in her party, in the opposition parties. Everyone has been angry with her, but she's still there. There's one thing I wonder about what she's done, and that is, why didn't she make any alliances before? She has said all the time, this is the deal. This is the deal that's on the table. This is my deal. This is the one that I have negotiated with the EU. That's what we have, and nothing else. And we've seen now, in a last few weeks, that there has been kind of conversations between the different politicians. But I thought that came very late. I thought maybe they would cooperate more in such a difficult question for the nation. I wrote a book, and it came out in November 2017, and it's called Hva nå? What Now? And I think that that title is still very, no one knows what's going to happen. We can always guess, and Espen and Richard, who will come after me, will talk more about the possibilities now. And everyone here in Norway asks me, because I'm supposed to know quite a lot about this, what happens now? You know, there was this deal, Theresa May's deal, that was voted over twice in Parliament, rejected twice, quite substantially as well. Can that be voted on again? Most people think no. Not as it is, anyway. And the Speaker in the House of Commons has said, no, I don't want to see that again if it's not changed. Could it happen? I don't think so, but that's what they say that they might do, but Theresa May says, I won't put it into Parliament again if I'm not sure that I can get it through. And I don't think she can. And then could there be no deal at all? Could it just crash out? Not on the 29th of March, because it's been postponed now until the 12th of April, but that still could happen, with all the consequences that have. The very strong Brexiters in Britain, the ones who really wants to go out of the EU, they think that's a good thing to do, because then you can sort of start from scratch and build up new deals and everything. So that's another possibility. You have something they call Norway Plus, which is our EØS-avtale with the customs union as well. So now they're all debating this. And as we speak, there are, according to the BBC, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of London demanding a new referendum. Could that happen? Yeah, could happen. And then some other people say that you should just, just cancel the deal. And there's this on the website of the Parliament. There's now they're going for what's the English word? Signatures. They're gathering signatures for, say, we had this Article 50 that would get us out of the EU. We just withdraw it. And I think it was 2.2 million people who had put their signatures on it yesterday. Now, when I checked, it was 4.3 million, and it's going up and up and up. So that's another alternative. I was traveling around all over Britain after they said no to the EU. And I'll end up with a priest in a town called Port Call in Wales. His name is Philip Masson. He voted to stay in the EU. It's 2.5 years since I met him. And today he has proved to be prophetic. He said, I will be very surprised if they manage to fulfill all this in only 2 years. And he was right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tonight's second speaker, Espen Aas, is also a former correspondent for the NRK in London. Please give him a warm welcome.
Yes, so hello, thank you for having us. I can't go anywhere without a PowerPoint, so this is my PowerPoint. Used a song by a band called Talking Heads, which was famous a few years ago in the 80s. And they had a song called Road to Nowhere, which is kind of how this sometimes feels. So this is Theresa May nailing Brexit. So this happened sort of on my watch. I was in the UK as a correspondent from 2013 to 2017, but I also lived in London in the 90s. Not so many years ago, as a student. And I remember every time going to the post office. I was studying in this fairly rough part of London, and I said, well, I'm going to post this letter. And the woman behind the counter said, where to, pet? To Norway. Oh, outside Europe then. No, yes, no. And so it went on and on every time. Now things are a bit different, and they know quite a lot more about Norway, or at least the name. So, as Annette said, David Cameron wanted to find a solution in 2013 about all these arguments going on inside the Conservative Party. There was another party called UKIP, the Independence Party, who wanted Britain out of the EU, and they were gaining in the polls. They were taking voters from the Conservative Party. So he said, "Okay, let's have a referendum," which some people thought was a very good idea. Apart from the other party he was in government with, which was the Lib Dem, similar to the Norwegian Venstre, and they said, no, as long as we're in a coalition, that is not going to happen. So it all quieted down for a little while, and they had another very, very important referendum in 2014, in September 18th, the referendum about Scotland. And one of the big arguments that was used for not giving Scotland independence was, if you leave the UK, you also leave the EU. But if you choose to be inside the United Kingdom, you'll still be a member of the EU. How about that? And of course, they voted in the end no to independence, because they are, and were as well, quite happy with the membership of the EU, not as happy with the UK. And then, because there was referendums and elections going on all the time, they had another general election, and nobody thought Cameron would win. Well, some people, but not many. They thought it might be another hung parliament, but that didn't happen. He actually won, and surprise, surprise, he had to call the referendum, being placed on the 23rd of June. And it was quite an interesting time. It was very quiet at first, but as we approached 2016 and the big date, I was traveling all around the UK, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England, of course, and they all had these different approaches to leaving the EU. They had never thought about it, and they could have been a member of anything, because they'd been a member of the EU as long as I've lived, more or less. But as the day approached, they had to make up their minds, and on the actual day, on the 23rd of June, I remember I was in Uxbridge, which is Boris Johnson's constituency. He doesn't live there, but he's elected for Uxbridge. And I was standing between two tables. It was the Remain camp, and it was the Leave camp. And these two old ladies were standing there saying, oh, I don't know what to do. So can you help us? Can you help us? Should we vote Remain, or should we vote Leave? And they had absolutely no idea, but they knew they had to vote. And in the end, as you all know, they voted to go out. Some people were very, very happy, and some people not so happy. But as Annette said, so many people were taken by surprise. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning in my house in London, and I checked my phone, and it says, looks like Britain's going to leave the EU. And an hour later, we were all sure that was going to happen. So I took the tube from Waterloo Station to Bank Station, which is in the city. It's the most packed tube you can take in the morning in London. On that morning, there was hardly anyone there. Everyone had gone to work many, many hours later because the pound was falling and it was complete chaos. So everyone was there. And this is how they voted, which is very interesting to see, because they were so divided. Yes, almost 52% of the Brits said we want to leave, whereas in London, only 40%, England 53%, Scotland only 38%, Wales 53%, and Northern Ireland 54%. So it went from a united, if there ever was one, to a divided kingdom, which was so interesting afterwards as well, because all of a sudden the debate about independence popped up again in Scotland. I went to Wales, in North Wales, people were talking about the same thing. Maybe this is the time to build a new Wales after hundreds and hundreds of years of being part of the United Kingdom. So this was Brexit after the 23rd. Cameron resigned, the Leave campaign just disappeared for a while. The markets tumbled, and no one knew what was going to happen. Then, of course, Theresa May came in, and it's gone all very well, as we know, flagging the dead horse and all that. 1,003 days today since the referendum. And where are we now? This is the Norwegian cartoonist Morten Mørland, who draws his cartoons for The Times and also VG. But this is sort of the timeline from next week. They might have the third go at Theresa May still, and if they approve, they're going to leave the EU on the 22nd of May, but they're probably going to say no. and then they have to vote about extensions, and if that passes, they can look at various different options, or if they reject that, there might be a no deal. So if things were undecided 1,003 days ago, we're still there in a way. Not everything can happen, but pretty much everything. And it's been such an interesting ride. It's hard for me, as a former correspondent, to start any day without thinking about what's happening. And if you listen to British podcasts, British radio programs, it's all about Brexit. And then if you come down to the third or fourth news item, there might be something about the health system, the transport system, or anything else. But it's all about this. And it will continue to be so into how long? We don't know. Maybe the 22nd of May, maybe the 12th of April, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. We'll see, and we'll talk about that later. But we're now going to give the stage to Richard Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Espen Aas. As you said, the third and final introduction tonight will be given by the British Ambassador to Norway, Ambassador Richard Wood. Please give him a warm welcome.
Tusen takk, først og fremst veldig lei for at alle må snakke engelsk I kveld, for min skyld, men maybe you can ask a question later in Norwegian, as long as you speak tydelig. That was a very good introduction. I always envy smart journalists because A, they're smart, and B, they get to be entertaining and say exactly what they like. I work for the government, however. In my 10 minutes, I am going to make you 5 propositions. One, we should have expected this all along, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. Given the complexity of Brexit and the task faced in actually getting out, let alone designing the future, we might have expected that it would take the full 2 years. We might have expected that there would be such a variety of opinions in the British Parliament, and we might have expected that the EU would put down some rather demanding conditions. I think one thing that contributed to making it very difficult was that the EU said from day one, we talk only about getting out. You're not allowed to talk about the future. First you get out, and then we talk about what kind of arrangement. That knocked Britain for 6 a little bit, because the entire referendum campaign, indeed the discussions about Europe going back many years, as Annette and Espen set out, were never about what exactly would be the bill for leaving, or how would we sort out our membership of Euratom and all of those other things in the withdrawal agreement. It was all about what kind of future relationship do we want. So this has been a difficult process, because Parliament, you will have seen, is talking about customs union or single market, or all of the things that have not even yet been discussed. So we should have seen this would be difficult, number one. My proposition number 2 is a deal is still there, and still, I would say, more likely than no deal. Why do I say that? Because a deal is actually in everybody's interests. A deal is in the interests of the UK, our economy, our society, our wish to continue to be a contributing part of Europe in the future. All of that means that no deal is far, far better for the UK than no deal. That's the government's very firm view, that leaving with a deal sets us up for the future. It also happens to be the view of other EU leaders, that a deal is much better for them too, for exactly the same reasons, but read their own economies rather than the British economy. For their own economies, there have been studies done which show that EU member states, some of them would lose as much as 4% of GDP in a no-deal scenario, whereas if we have an orderly and calm Brexit, it is possible to arrange the kind of Brexit which would be smooth and orderly. And also because they recognise very valuable things that the UK can continue to cooperate on and contribute to in the European sphere. I could name hundreds of them. I could name the fact that we designed a sanctions policy that helps back up some of our common European foreign policy. It could be that we are the biggest single contributor to databases that keep us safe from terrorists at the borders, getting on flights. It could be any one of those things. My third proposition to you tonight is that Brexit is not an event, it is a process. Everybody has been waiting for, I've even heard it described as the Brexit. When is the Brexit happening? And in fact, I think we need to lift our horizons slightly from, well, it was the 29th of March. We're now been forced to lift them slightly, but my proposition is we should lift them beyond that, because Brexit is not something that is going to be settled from one day to the next. We were never going to wake up on the 30th of March and the world would look completely different. We have to keep going to make sure that the relationship that evolves, because don't forget the EU itself has evolved over many years into something entirely different than it was when it started. We need to be in this for the long haul. The EU needs to be in it for the long haul. It is a process, not an event. My fourth point, I think, is that Europe does still need the UK close to the EU for the reasons I set out before, but for many others as well. I think it is inconceivable that the EU's largest military force could go and you could have no contact between the future EU defence policy and the UK. I think it is impossible that you could have working supply chains in the car industry without British manufacturers. I think it is impossible that you could have functioning Europe on counter-terrorism without British contributions. So with calm heads and reduced temperature in the room, I think everybody will see that it is in Europe's advantage as well as our advantage to find a way through this. And that the UK not only can, but wants to keep contributing to a common European space, common European prosperity, common European defence, and so on and so on. My fifth point to you, and final point, brings it right back to us here, and this is the UK and Norway relationship. In many ways, we have it slightly easier than between the UK and the EU. Norway's EØS-avtale excludes quite important parts of the economy, and they just happen to be important parts of UK-Norwegian trade. So energy trading doesn't come under the single market, doesn't come under the EØS-avtale. It is a direct bilateral thing that the UK and Norway can agree to continue doing regardless. I think also if you look at fisheries, we have said quite clearly we do not want to be part of a future common fisheries policy with the EU. We would far rather be an independent coastal nation agreeing good, workable fishing agreements with other independent coastal nations such as Norway, Iceland, Faroes, and others in our common space around the North Sea. And in fact, I think we are the two nations involved in fishing that have the closest commonality of idea about what a sustainable long-term fishing industry means. It isn't just about the numbers you catch, it isn't just about fish welfare and net sizes, it's about a sustainable marine environment, and we are both nations at the forefront of research on the marine environment. So these are the kinds of things where Norway and the UK will simply just carry on and actually potentially have more scope to cooperate than we have had before. It's hard to put a figure on it, but I suspect that maybe 70 to 80% of what I do around the country has nothing to do with Brussels at all. I go up north quite often, Bardufoss and other areas, Kirkenes and Lakselva, and talk to Forsvaret about all kinds of interesting projects to train and make sure that our armed forces are interoperable into the future. I go to Kårstø and talk about gas processing and selling gas to the UK, which has nothing to do with the single market. I talk to research institutes about common projects that we have underway on Arctic research and marine environment. I talk about electric vehicle summits and Norway teaching us how to increase the amount of electric transport that we have in the UK. All of that has nothing to do with the Brexit debate. It is just about a common will between the UK and Norway to continue to collaborate and coordinate as we have in the past. So those are my 5 propositions. I've probably more than used up my 10 minutes. Happy to answer any questions later. But I've avoided speculating on exactly what will happen, you've noticed, and rather talked about the things that aren't often talked about, and that is how we take all of this, lift our horizon and take all of this into the further future. But for now, thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers for great introductions. We'll move on to Surfer Chat shortly. And while Magnus and our guests get ready, everyone who wants to ask questions or join the debate can sign up with Inga over by the stairs. Okay, then it's all yours, Magnus.
Well, thank you. As mentioned before, the Brexit election was held on the 23rd of June in 2016. So we're actually exactly 2 years and 9 months down the road, and Brexit remains a large question mark after years of chaos. Today we're going to ask and hopefully discuss some important questions, and you can participate, as mentioned, by writing up as Inga. And if you have any problems with asking the questions in English, there's absolutely no problem asking them in Norwegian, as they all understand Norwegian, and I'll translate it for the whole, so that's no problem. I would like to get an idea of the audience here tonight, so if you could get some light on the audience. And I would like to do a quick and very informal referendum. Could we, by show of hands, see who here think that the UK did the right thing by saying yes to Brexit? Show of hands. Okay, so I think that's about 0.1%. Okay, so who here think it was a bad idea? The large majority. Okay, and who's undecided? Some. Okay, that gets some idea of the Norwegian and some international meaning on that. Well, this isn't a very important debate, but only a few hours ago I came across a very important article. So if Veko can show the picture number 1, there's not going to be a Brexit.
I heard that.
So, okay, we know that now, there won't be a Brexit, but I think we'll go on with the topic anyway, as we'll all hear. Well, so, as I said, Brexit has been a roller coaster in more or less the 3 last years. And thankfully, we've gotten some explanation of why Brexit has been the way it has. So I think we can go back to the time when it started, because what they did was to ask a question which was yes or no to a question which has many more answers than yes or no. So I was wondering if it's possible for you, as you talk to the British public, is it possible to say something about what kind of Brexit were they voting for? Was there an idea in the British populace about how we're actually exiting? What would it mean? Espen?
Well, I think they all had their own idea of what Brexit should be. And the only answer, obviously, they got from the Prime Minister is that Brexit means Brexit, which isn't terribly useful. But as I was traveling around, a lot of people told me about immigration. The story I was told most often was the queues when you wanted to see your GP or your doctor. And people always told me, well, I have to wait 8 weeks to come to the doctor, and the reason is immigration. Okay. And everyone told me that. In Northern Ireland, where there's hardly any immigrants, even in Scotland, especially in England, and especially in London. So it's a lot to do with immigration, and they didn't really know what it was about. And then other people, some of my close English friends, it was taking back control, which was this wonderful phrase they managed to cook up. Taking back control. It has to be positive. It can't be a negative thing to take back control, unless you look at it now, perhaps, I don't know. But that was very, very important, especially in England, when I traveled around there. Parts of Wales as well, whereas in the north, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it wasn't so much that. But I met people in Northern Ireland who were skeptical about the EU, saying, why do people there who are not even elected tell us what to do? What kind of vacuum cleaners we can use, what light bulbs, and all kinds of cliches.
Curved bananas and stuff.
Well, they didn't go that far. Cucumbers.
Cucumbers, yeah.
So I think they all had their own idea, and it was so easy to tell people how bad the EU was, and it was all a different story to tell them how good the EU was. And I sort of remember that back to our own debate, which was one of my first votes. It was kind of the same debate, with so many cliches and so many myths about what the EU was and wasn't. And the only thing you were asked to do was to say yes or no.
Do you agree with this? It's simply take back control?
I met quite a lot of the same arguments around the country, but immigration, for instance, and I met people who said, yeah, you know, have you seen all the Muslims coming here in the street? There is so, and I said, well, that's got nothing to do with the EU. But things like that you could get. And then, on the other hand, I talked to like this building worker in Bedford, and I said, well, aren't you angry because of the immigration, because that's, you know, your job? And he said, no, they're my best workmates. He was angry with his government because the luxury flats that he was building in Kensington, which is a very posh area of London, he said, if a third of them are being inhabited permanently by people, homes, being homes, that's the most. The rest was investors of all kinds who bought them up. And he said, I want a government who doesn't fiddle around with the EU, but who makes houses for people like me. He had to go up and down to Bedford every day, 1 hour each way. And policemen, teachers, nurses, other people, that they should be able to get flats in London that were affordable. But also, as far as I've been able to see, there was no plan for what would happen if there was a no. That was the same answer as this Norwegian diplomat I was talking about, who said to his British colleagues, but what happens if there's a no? And they said, well, there's not going to be a no. And the campaign on each side, I must say, was not very good before the referendum. One of the things was this bus that you might have seen it, that Boris Johnson was driving around it. Boris Johnson, who being a leader in the Leave campaign, on the bus it said, like, every week we give £320 million to the EU. If we leave, this money is going to go to our own health system, the NHS. And just as Brexit was a fact, Nigel Farage, who was a leader of this UK Independence Party, he was asked about that bus and what was on it, and he retreated at once. You know, so there was a lot of bad election campaign, I think, as well, which didn't inform people well enough.
But if we took another referendum today, what could we expect? Is the British population now 50-50 still, or how do we always assume? Are you willing to speculate?
I want to ask about that. I don't think it has changed enough. I mean, if you want to ask for another vote, you have to be certain that the mood has changed properly. So imagine if you had another vote and 52% said remain. Should you respect that referendum more than the previous? Obviously not.
People here in Norway seem to think that there's a big majority now for Remain if there would be a new referendum. But looking at the polls and from what I've seen, I must say, as Espen, it's still very close. And it's always difficult with referenda if they're so close. Always difficult.
They want the process to end, but I don't think they've changed their opinion that much.
No.
What would you like to see from us next week now? Are you hoping for a yes in the next decision?
Well, the government still feels that there is, that a deal is the best way to go. Leaving without a deal is messy, it would be difficult, and therefore all the things that we've worked out with the European Union in order to make a deal smooth, that is the way that we should go. But it has been difficult, clearly, and again I go back to we shouldn't necessarily be surprised that there are so many shades of opinion within Parliament that we have to convince members of Parliament that that is the way to leave, and then the discussion for the future settlement is something that can be discussed. So the government is definitely trying to persuade MPs to take that route, to have an orderly exit, and then to have a series of whether it's votes in Parliament or some other way of coming up with a consensus around how we should be approaching those negotiations for the future settlement. But I was head of the EU department going into the referendum. I mean, we did set out what all the alternatives were as part of the referendum debate, but it very quickly became not a factual debate, it became a political debate. And those facts were drowned out in many ways. But I think that, for ordinary people, this is phenomenally complicated. If you're in the customs union but out of the single market, or the other way around, what does that mean? How are they expected to know that? And I think if you keep it on a very political level, it is really hard to make a rational case to people for the different models. And what the Prime Minister has tried to do is to put forward a model in the political declaration of the withdrawal agreement, which treads a real middle line. It takes us out of the European Union. It returns control to London for policy making, but facilitates maximum possible collaboration with both economic partners and allies and people who share the same geographical space as us.
But Richard, could I ask you something? Because you were very clear. You say that it's much better to leave with a deal than with no deal. But I mean, this deal, it's been voted on now twice. I mean, the first time it was the biggest defeat in history almost, or since 1924 or something. And then there was a big defeat the second time, although it was a bit of amendment to it. I just cannot see how it can pass. But you can. Obviously.
Well, I mean, I think there is one issue that has caused a real problem with the withdrawal agreement. If you remember back, all of the other deals, such as the 40-something billion pound bill and all of the other issues were settled some time ago. But the backstop became a political issue because what it said was that that control wouldn't actually be returned, that the EU would continue to have a say in how long the UK had to stay in a customs union because of the Irish border question. And it has been raised to a real totemic kind of level in the debate that is quite hard to solve. But the trick, I think, is to persuade people that that kind of backstop only comes into place in any case if we fail to reach a future deal with the EU. So let's have a calm and orderly Brexit that sets us on a path of cooperation. Then let's have a debate around the future arrangements. And in that case, the backstop simply wouldn't be relevant in any case.
Just another aspect on the way to the referendum, which is easy to forget about. Because normally, although there's many votes in the UK, local elections, EU elections, parliament elections, there hadn't been that many referendums. And it was also different. And a very good friend of mine, who's the most common man I know, we went to university together. He's a cab driver in London, and he meets people every day, and he discusses EU all the time. But what he explained me about this vote was, everyone has told me in advance how it will end. Everyone in government are telling me that it will be a yes for remaining in the Union. Every journalist is saying the same thing in their expensive suits, with their expensive cars, just as the government, and every academic, more or less, is saying the same thing. But the polls are very, very close, and they still say there will be a swing against Remain. Well, I'm not having that, and this is my say. I remember he said, I want to have that on my tombstone. When I die, I voted no, and I voted against the establishment. And it's easy to forget that little aspect as well, because it was a protest against being told what is the common and right way. And especially in England, which swung the vote anyway, that was also the start of what happened in the US sometime later, when we came to the presidential campaign. There as well a protest against the elite.
And this entire process also showed kind of a new way of civil discourse. If actually we can show video number 1, which is of Nigel Farage in 2010 when he was at Brussels. So if video number 1 is on its way. Well,
we were told that when we had a president, we'd see a giant global political figure. The man that would be the political leader for 500 million people. The man that would represent all of us on the world stage. The man whose job was so important that, of course, you're paid more than President Obama. Well, I'm afraid what we got was you. And I'm sorry, but after that performance earlier that you gave, and I don't want to be rude, but you know, really, you have the charisma of a damp rag and the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk. And the question that I want to ask, that we're all going to ask is, who are you? I'd never heard of you. Nobody in Europe had ever heard of you. I would like to ask you, President, who voted for you? And what mechanism? Oh, I know democracy is not popular with you lot. And what mechanism do the peoples of Europe have to remove you? Is this European democracy? Well, I sense, though, that you're competent and capable and dangerous. And I have no doubt that it's your intention to be the quiet assassin of European democracy and of the European nation states. You appear to have a loathing for the very concept of the existence of nation states. Perhaps that's because you come from Belgium, which of course is pretty much a non-country.
I think we can end it there. So my point being there, which is of course the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage, did this process kind of usher in a new level of uncivil discourse in the political debate, or is it just something we have seen only first now because Brexit is the first?
Well, where is he now? His party is almost gone and he's out. And I remember when Brexit was a fact, someone in the European Parliament, and this was from there, said that the best thing about this is that we don't have to pay our wages anymore, Mr. Farage, he said. So, yeah, well, that's sort of so rude, I think, that you shouldn't be able to behave like that. But he's nothing anymore. I mean, he's out of the party because there was some right-wing, even more right-wing person who's in there, some from National Defence League, was it?
Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, Tommy Robinson. So he left. I mean, who is he?
Yeah.
No one now.
But it's interesting because he was very good at pinpointing all the wrong things with the EU, and he also very much well played the card of being the common man. Because if you look at the way he dressed in the European Parliament, he had a nice suit and a nice tie. I met him many times campaigning for Leave, and he was dressed very differently. He always had these funny colors on his tie. He didn't have these expensive suits. He was smoking all the time. He was drinking his pint and being the common man. And then he befriended Donald Trump, back to his expensive suits again, and he wanted to play that role. But he did play very much the common man during the campaign and said, well, this is the small man's war against the big system, which is the EU, which he had some fair points, of course. And at least he taught the Brits what not to like about the EU, but of course he never told the other story, the good reasons why they were in the Union in the first place.
Of course, in the beginning, it was, as we mentioned, that it was David Cameron who kind of put this question forward. But as you can see in the HBO movie Brexit, where Benedict Cumberbatch portrays a man called Dominic Cummings, he says that kind of the goal of the Leave campaign is to create the largest political upset since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Is this kind of an aptly description of the drive behind the Leave political movement?
I think there definitely was a move, as Espen said, to portray, obviously successfully, if your cab driver friend is a good example, to portray the politicians and the government campaigning for to stay in the European Union and putting forward ideas why this was good for the UK, to portray that as some kind of treachery of the ordinary people. And there is this common myth about people who had won from globalization and people who had lost from globalization. I think there were attempts to try to put people into different camps and to apportion labels to them and to say that they should vote a certain way. And that was the point, I think, at which the rationality of the debate sometimes got lost. It was very difficult. You'll remember the quote, people have had enough of experts. That's at the point at which it became very difficult to put across facts in the referendum campaign that were then weighed up and considered and contributed to taking a view. They were simply dismissed if they came from someone who was Leave, and or dismissed if they came from somebody who was Remain, and that was quite a difficult point for those of us trying to run a referendum campaign that was based on fact and argument.
There was absolutely an anti-elite thing with many of the UKIP people I met anyway. They were against things, and they thought that the government in London didn't hear them, didn't see them. It reminds me sometimes about people in the Rust Belt in America who had some of the same feeling. For instance, I was in the south of Wales, you know, in those mining societies where all the mines had been closed and people had lost their jobs and their pride in a way. These were just sort of little sleeping villages now. And that was an element, I think, that UKIP managed to sort of draw people to them because these were people who felt that they had been forgotten, that now it was all like, you know, computers and economics and all that counted, not their old work. And I saw some of the same thing in the north of England as well.
But I think that's a good point that you made about the Rust Belt, because actually it is a point about adaptation of economies in almost every country, that you have to adapt the economy. And I think that we've stopped talking, for example, about the city of London as the financial centre, and we now call it just the city, because there are so many of those jobs that have now been created in Belfast, in Manchester, in Leeds, in Birmingham, Edinburgh and other places. And there has been a real attempt to spread the wealth more widely and to replace some of those industries that went down, manufacturing, for example, many years ago. So I think the argument about losers from globalization, you know, there are attempts to try and address those in every country, and that wasn't something that was unique to the UK.
I think then can Benjamin Haslev make himself ready to ask his question, but This as I talked about, this change in the civil discourse, it kind of reminds me
What did you call it? Change?
In the civil discourse, the kind of the public debate. It kind of reminds me of the Hillary Clinton quote of the Trump supporters being a box of, or a bunch of deplorables, a basket of deplorables, I think it was. It would seem for some time that the Brexit supporters were kind of the stupid ones, the people who didn't know what was happening, who were uneducated and stuff like that. Which is kind of a way of almost just reuniting them or unifying them even stronger and making this kind of split in the UK population even stronger?
Well, it's a very unfair portrayal. One of my best friends who lives here, he's got 2 PhDs in psychiatry. He's a very educated and a very smart man, but he is a Brexiteer. And he wants to go for a no deal. He wants to build up British identity, but he's a proud Brit. He's not nationalist or anything like that, but he's seeing it from a different way, and he's proud of Britishness, which is something which is fading in some parts of the UK. In Scotland, they're very much proud of being Scottish. Northern Ireland, either British or Irish, and of course, even in Wales, the Welsh identity is bubbling up. And I met so many well-educated people all over the UK who were strong believers in a new future, and they wanted to show the world that Britain can. We are a very strong United Kingdom, they said, and it's possible for us to do that without the EU. But it's very easy to say because, yes, in especially parts of southeast in England, that were very much against the EU, and well, a lot of people were out of work. They didn't have jobs, so went on benefit. They were going on benefits. Same in other parts of England. So it's very easy to portray them as simple people, but they weren't. I mean, I was amazed how much people have read into the problem in those towns, in those cities, because they knew they were going to make a very, very difficult choice, and they wanted to know what they were going on about. So I think always thought that was a very unfair portrayal.
But it was very hard for them, Espen, to find information they could trust.
Absolutely.
It was so polarized.
It was always biased.
For every point they read on one side, somebody was writing the exact opposite. And I think on social media, for example, you find really harsh comments and criticism of people that polarizes the debate even more. In a sense, we've lost that kind of face-to-face debating culture and resorted to name-calling on Twitter, which I think has not helped this process in the least.
I think then Benjamin Haslev can ask his question. Arild Oren make himself ready.
Ærede Storsal, my name is Benjamin and I am a member. This is a question that goes out to all 3 of you. Because Wednesday, the 13th of March, the Parliament of in Britain rejected to leave the EU on a no-deal vote. And I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about how does the road for no-deal Brexit look now? Is it still possible? Thank you.
Well, it seems like, as you said, the majority of the people in Parliament will not leave the EU without a deal. And that's the difficult thing, because there was a deal, and then that was rejected. The prospect of leaving without a deal, I wouldn't be able to say how likely it is, but it is likely.
I think
it could happen.
Yeah, I think it's more likely now than a week ago.
What is most likely?
It's hard to say, for anyone to say. That's $1 million question. I personally don't think Britain will leave without a deal, but they are so divided on so different issues. You have part of the Conservative Party who really see the possibility now of a no deal. If you continue to vote down every other deal on the table, you will have to leave without a deal. And then, obviously, in the Labour Party, which is a pro-EU party, most of it anyway, they want to have either a custom union with the EU or even some of them a Norway Plus deal, as Annette explained earlier. So they want to vote down everything else. And if they can't agree on anything, there is no other option. So it's all down to counting votes and all down to the whips to whip through whatever possible deal. But I think it's more possible with a no deal now than I thought, say, a week ago.
Is it still possible? Yes, it's still possible because it's the default. It's still, in fact, written into UK law that we're leaving next Friday, and that needs to be changed, in fact, to allow for the extension granted by the EU. So the default, if we can't reach an agreement that everyone can support, the default is that we leave with no deal. But the vote that you mentioned, in fact, wasn't the first. In fact, there have been more than one vote on no deal, shows a clear majority to try to avoid that. But what is the alternative? That is what we're grappling with. And attempts are going on. If everyone believes that no deal is a bad thing, then we have a common objective, and it's simply a case of trying to find what we can put through. But is it possible? Yes, it's possible, and the government is making all kinds of preparations or plans for that, should that be the case, but nobody wants it.
I think then we can go straight to Arild Oren, and he can ask his question.
Arild, jeg ikke medlem. I have two quick questions. The first one is about research cooperation between Norway and the UK. Let's say there is a no deal. How can this have an effect on research projects that we have with colleagues in the UK, especially through like projects like EU-funded like Horizon 2020? And my second question is, there's been talk about a citizens' assembly in the UK about Brexit. A little bit like they did in Ireland on the abortion referendum. And I'm just wondering if you have some thoughts about if this is even possible in the situation that we are now, or if this is like a missed opportunity for the Brexit, that they should have had a citizens' assembly on the issue. Thank you.
Citizens' assembly, I mean, we have one of those, it's called Parliament, right? I mean, you vote for people who represent your views, and they go to Parliament, and Parliament discusses and sorts out the situation. So I think that members of Parliament are trying to represent the people of the country. It's very hard when each constituency is differently weighted with people who voted in different ways. And they are trying very hard to try to find a way through. But there are so many different possible outcomes that corralling all of that opinion into one way forward is has been the problem. So we have a way forward. It's called the parliamentary process. We just need to try and make that work. On research, we've done a lot of work trying to talk to, I've seen the rector here and others around the country talking about the future of cooperation in research. The UK is the leading member of more groups of research in Europe than any other member state of the EU or member state of Horizon. And we have said, I think, quite clearly that we want to continue both with Horizon 2020 while it's still ongoing, and then Horizon Plus. And we have looked at whether there is a possibility of funding applications that would fall, or projects that are underway that would suffer from a no-deal Brexit. So we, just as Norway is a member of the Horizon family without being an EU member, that's what we've said we would like to do as well. Don't see any reason why it wouldn't happen. The UK is the leading research nation in Europe, and we believe it would be in our interest and Europe's interest for that cooperation to continue. So we are determined to be a part of future collaboration on research and trying hard to make that happen.
Then we'll, any moment now, have a break, but before that I'll give the word back to Eirik.
Yeah, okay, I'll just read out the speakers list as it stands now. That's Magnus Torslund, Borde Koch, Eivind Røndal, Nils Arne Lindås, Joseph Whittington, Tony Beck, and Ane Vorhaug. Can Storsalen approve a proposal and admissions to the speakers list before we take a break? Nice. We'll take a 15-minute break and meet up here again at 10:20 to 8. Will Storsalen quiet down, please? Will Storsalen quiet down, please? Yeah. Thank you. We'll now continue the sofa chat with our guests, and I'll just give the word straight back to you, Magnus.
Thanks, and I'll give the word straight on to Magnus Torslund, and Bordikok can get ready to ask his question.
Honorable Storsal, Mr. Ambassador, my name is Magnus and I'm a member. Among all this chaos in the whole Brexit ordeal, one of the really exciting developments for me has been recently when we've seen prominent members of both the Tory and Labour Party moving away from their own party to form the independent group. And they seem to have a few pretty new ideas about how to do party politics in the 21st century. So my question is really, do you think the independent group is the beginning of an exciting new movement in an otherwise stagnant democracy in Britain? Or is it not, but a footnote in history? Thank you.
I think that's what they call a loaded question. Sorry.
No, I just thought it's difficult, though, you know, with the party system that you have in Britain, to form a new party that would get a lot of influence, because you have the two-party system and the first past the post system and all, in parliamentary elections. But it was quite significant, you know, that these Labour members left Labour, and then there came some Conservative members and joined the group. Will they be powerful? Well, hang me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're going to be very powerful. But they have some things in common. One of the things they have in common is that they want a new referendum. And that is the big question today, as we were talking about before, you know, where, according to the BBC, hundreds of thousands of people are in the street of London to demand a new referendum. And then I want to ask you, Richard, do you think there will be a new referendum?
I'd rather answer that question than that one. So I think, well, on the independent group, I think that there have been divisions in the two main parties on Europe since forever. Less so in the Labour Party than the Conservative Party, I would say, historically. But this, of course, debate over what kind of Brexit we should have and what kind of future process we should have has sharpened or polarized the debate perhaps even more. And so I think what you've seen there with the forming of the new group is a direct result of this Brexit debate, and therefore a single issue group. And I shouldn't comment, and I won't comment on where I think it will go. What I would like to see, what the government I think would like to see, is a kind of real honest debate in Parliament, within parties, within Parliament, about where we take this process for the good of the country. And I think that's as much as I can say. On a second referendum, I think the government is clear. We've had a referendum, right? I mean, it is a very difficult issue to tell the people who voted and were in the majority last time somehow that they were wrong, and the fact that they need to do it again. And people point to the fact that it's happened in Ireland and France and Denmark and other places where they've had votes on European treaties and then voted again to try and get them ratified. But that is a completely different issue. That is on one piece of legislation. That is on one aspect of policy. This fundamentally was on what constitutional setup do we want for our country going into the future. And I think it's very hard to tell people they were wrong in their decisions. So what the Prime Minister has said is she needs to implement the referendum that we've already had, and to do it in a way which is of much benefit to Britain as we can possibly manage.
You shook your head in a quite confident manner, Espen. There's no chance?
Well, no, I don't think any party will survive. I mean, there's another party, the Lib Dems, who have been campaigning for another referendum all the time.
Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, and it's not helping them in the polls. Their leader just left the party, or announced he's going to leave the party. And you need so many other issues as well, and there are 650 different constituencies all over Britain. And it's only one member from each constituency. So they are 11 independent members of parliament now. How on earth are they going to survive any election? I don't think it's possible because of the system, which won't be changed anytime soon. There was a division in the Labour Party many years ago with a fraction, which survived for a bit. UKIP was huge in the polls, but again, the electoral system meant that they ended up with only one MP.
But is this side of the kind of British political system, wouldn't that just kind of keep the fire burning of those who feel that they are anti-establishment, they can't get a foothold in the political system, they can't get new ideas across, and kind of just keep this anti-establishment fire going?
Well, they tried to change it once, and I think 40% of the voters turned up to vote at all when they had a vote to change the electoral system, and huge majority said, let's keep it the way it is. We don't want change.
Yeah, when I came to Britain in '91, there was going to be a parliamentary election in '92. And the Lib Dems then were, or the Liberals maybe they were, and I can't remember, but they were campaigning on this proportional representation like we have in this country. And they've been campaigning for that for all those years with no result. The only thing that's happened is, because under Tony Blair there was a devolution of power, so like Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales got their sort of parliaments, local parliaments, and there they have a so complicated mix of how they're counting the votes. It's a bit of proportional representation and a bit of that. I mean, I've been to elections in Northern Ireland. I haven't understood anything about how it was, but that has happened. But campaigning for another system under parliamentary elections, I don't have any belief in that. I think that it will go on with the first past the post system, which favors the two main parties.
I think then Bård de Kock can ask his question, and Eivind Rindal can get ready.
Ærede Storsalen, jeg heter Bård, og jeg er medlem. I have a question that relates kind of to the point that was made about the £350 million bus and about how we are fed up with experts. In general, we see in politics and in campaigns more and more lies, propaganda, fake news, whatever you call it. In this referendum, we have a president in the US who thinks climate change is a hoax. Closer to home in the Netherlands, last Tuesday they elected someone who says the universities are undermining society. So the question is maybe mostly to the journalists. Do you think we are living in what is becoming a post-truth society? And how can we stop that? And can we stop that?
That's a big question.
We'll answer that in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I think there is a time when people have to reconnect to politics and media and have to sort of make a stand yourself for what you believe in. Obviously, there are a lot of alternative news. There are political parties with alternative meanings. And I think when I grew up and you grew up, we were told a story by politicians. We were told the story by the media, and there was not very easy to find other answers, apart from looking at other newspapers or listening to other parties. Now you have the whole internet, society, social media, alternative media, and so on. But I think people are getting better educated at reading politics and reading the media. So no, in the long run, I don't think so. But at the moment, things, we're at a turn where the politicians who shout the loudest will be heard. But I think it's changing. I do believe that some established media will reconnect or connect better with their audience, but we need to find another language to make that connection with, and same for politics. But there is an appetite for something else, which has been there for, I don't know, 10 years. Yeah. They want something else.
And you've been a journalist for a long time. Have you seen kind of this evolve? Have you seen because I've seen it named the internet meme concentration span, which is to say if it lasts longer than 30 seconds, it's better to just kind of explain it shorter in live if you have to. Is this something you have seen in your work through the years?
Absolutely. I started in NRK radio when there was only one radio channel. So, and I'm no independent ones, and even only one in NRK, so obviously you see it. But at the same time, I think that our job as journalists is still to find the facts and give them out. And how do you do it? I mean, it is difficult when you have a president in the United States who lies more than I've ever done in my whole life. And
so he just passed 2,000 lies in his presidency, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, but then still,
good for him.
The media does try, and we have here in Norway, we have like faktisk.no, which is a fact-checking...
Actually.no? Actually.no or something like that?
Yeah. But I have seen it coming, obviously. I mean, it's exploded. And we have our rules and our ethical rules and Vær varsom-plakaten and all this that we rule after. But then now everyone can be his or her own editor, you know, can do whatever. So to control it, I don't think you can, but I think we as journalists still have our job to do, and then...
we have to do it better.
Yeah, we have to do it better.
But to bring this back to the topic of Brexit, as we mentioned before, this kind of yes or no question, which has many more nuances than that, is that kind of making two very different camps, which is to say that then they have different sources of material they check up on, and if they don't agree with the stuff they already think, then they won't check it up. So has Brexit led to a kind of accelerated the fake news agenda?
It's always been there. I mean, British newspapers has always been so opinionated. I mean, obviously they didn't have the competition from social media in the old days. They had private owners. I know people who worked in the Daily Mail online, and one of them is now working in the Brexit department, funnily enough. But she told me a story. She was working for the Daily Mail online, which is like the biggest online newspaper in the UK. They didn't have a phone. Then I said, why? Because the editor just told us what story to write, which he had gotten from the owner. And we would say, I don't think that's the story. And he would say, yes, it is. And they were browsing the internet to find whatever facts that supported that story, being Instagram accounts, Facebook posts, whatever. But they never, ever phoned anyone. And that was very much some of the ways they drove the campaign during the referendum as well. The newspapers were very, very opinionated. Lots of the newspapers were against the EU. They wanted out. And all the journalism surrounded around that. You were called a traitor if you wanted to remain. They published where judges lived if they've made decisions against leaving and so on.
I think there's two things for me here. One is the proliferation of news sources that people have at their disposal. When I was a press officer pushing the government line on foreign policy, there were, you could count them on two hands, the number of news sources that you had to, or news outlets that you had to deal with. Now, anybody with a keyboard and a connection to the internet can be a source of news, or set themselves up as a source of news. So I think that is, people have lost that kind of perspective they had of the media. Everyone knew, and this is my second point, what was entertainment and what was factual journalism in the British newspapers, that was pretty clear, right? Nobody bought the News of the World to read, actual journalistic facts or reporting. They bought it because it was funny and entertaining. Now, do people actually know what they're reading is factual, propagandist, or entertainment? And I think there has been a real blurring of the lines, which has made getting messages across via the media much, much more difficult than it used to be in my day as a press officer.
I think then Eivind Ringdal can ask his question, and Nils Arne Lindås can get ready.
Ærede Storsal, mitt navn Eivind, jeg medlem. First, a short, maybe a little bit funny thing, a fun fact. If you look 30 years back, who would then believe that the most stable leader of the free world would be a chancellor from East Germany? And who will also, maybe, actually a lot of people already back in the 80s would have thought that maybe Britain should leave the European Union, but then, of course, here we are today. And of course we have discussed today the possibility of a new referendum, also deal, no deal, and different scenarios. But what about a new general election? Because the parliament in Britain is not working at the moment. The government are not actually governing. And especially for a country that has a tradition for majority governments, this parliament, though they have not downvoted Theresa May, they actually have in practice left her without the legitimacy that is needed to lead the process of so much importance that Brexit actually are. So when will there be a new election in Britain? Because they need it. I think that is maybe the only thing that actually can solve Brexit in a civilized way.
Thank you.
Well, it is another option, obviously, but how would it happen? I mean, she had a vote of confidence in the parliament, and they voted for her. All the people who had voted against her deal, or many of them, not all of them, but many of them voted for her, and why did they? I mean, under normal circumstances, I think that an opposition party with a government party with all this chaos would be like that on the opinion polls. Labour is not. So why is it? If I ask people, some people say that Jeremy Corbyn is unelectable, so they don't want him. But I mean, she has a vote of confidence. You could see a scenario where she can't get the deal through, and she'd give up, give in, say, okay, I've tried everything. Labour could, I can't really see, maybe you can fill me in on that, Espen, but how Labour could, what they could do to, because he obviously wants a new election, Jeremy Corbyn. So how can he manage to get it? I'm not sure, but that it is an option, I agree with you, absolutely.
But I don't think it would solve anything. I think we end up with a hung parliament again, and probably with a lesser majority for the Conservative Party. I don't think there will be a majority for Labour, so the problem would still be there. And the divisions are not between two big parties. There are divisions within the big parties. So I think it will be a better idea for democracy and for UK as well if the Parliament of today will be able to come together on the solution. Then there might be other changes as well, but I think spending time on another general election now would be a waste of time.
I think we can look a little bit into the kind of the EU perspective. So during the Brexit campaign, you had this saying by, I think it was Boris Johnson mainly, that our policy is having our cake and eating it too, which is kind of a slogan. And I have, if VK can turn on the video number 2, where the Council Donald Tusk, the European Council Donald Tusk, gives his answer. It's supposed to start from 1 minute and 4 seconds.
The words uttered by one of the leading campaigners for Brexit and proponents of the cake philosophy was pure illusion. That one can have the EU cake and eat it too. To all who believe in it, I propose a simple experiment. Buy a cake, eat it, and see if it is still there on the plate. The brutal truth is that Brexit will be a loss for all of us. There will be no cakes on the table for anyone. There will be only salt and vinegar.
Yeah, so I think we can end it there.
If there is any alternative to this bad scenario.
Yeah, so my point being that, well, it would seem that the EU is very intent on not giving UK the best of hands. Has the EU been a very difficult negotiator?
They have to be.
It's
in the job of any negotiator to be tough, and we've recognised all along that this is a negotiation, that the EU will set out its stall, what it's prepared to give, and we will set out our stall of what we would like to have, and there needs to be some process. As I said at the podium, we haven't even started to talk about the future yet, so we haven't had that process. I do think that what I find quite difficult to understand is a notion that you can either have a Canada solution or you can have a Norway solution, and there's absolutely nothing in between. The Norway solution didn't exist until Norway wanted to have that solution, right? I mean, Norway did slightly in advance, perhaps more cleverly, you might think, than we have, decided in advance it didn't want to be in the EU, but it wanted to have a close relationship. And the EU in those days was a very different organization and wanted to keep the near neighborhood close, with an avenue to becoming members later, perhaps. And designed a system for Norway which carved out of the single market the sensitive parts of the economy that had been problematic during your own referendum campaign, and created a solution that fitted and suited Norway and allowed it to have a close relationship. Well, our economy doesn't look like Norway's economy, but we would essentially like the same thing, something which takes account of peculiarities of the British situation, but keeps a very close relationship between the UK and the EU. But that doesn't look like Norway's solution, and it doesn't have to be as low ambition as Canada's. Why can't we discuss something that is in the middle, that is an ambitious free trade agreement with all kinds of agreements on areas that we already do the same things on? If that's called having your cake and eating it, well, you know, so be it. But it isn't impossible. It is something that we should all strive for, to have the closest relationship, which allows us to feel we've left, and the EU to feel it's getting the most out of the cooperation that is available.
Is Theresa May getting the most out of the cooperation possible these days? Is Theresa May getting the most out of the kind of the discussions these days? You said you had respect for her, for at least her ability.
No, I mean, she's been told all the time that she can't cherry pick, you know, and get the good things out of the EU and not the things that she doesn't want. But she has negotiated this deal, and what Richard says is that there are other options. But both the EU and her have said that this is the deal we have. This is the deal we're not going to go any further. And they've been very clear. They have made small amendments, but not big things. And it seems like it's not possible to discuss other solutions now. That's what you want. That's what you say. We have to make the discussion bigger in Parliament as well in order to try and get something through. But it seems like that train has gone.
And it's a bit depressing. I mean, we're discussing the divorce. Divorce is always difficult. Everyone who tried knows that. But one should talk more about the future, as you're saying, because that's the most important thing for the UK and the EU. What will EU and the UK look like after the divorce? But we're still having this huge row about the actual divorce. Why use so much time on something that doesn't matter in 10 years? Doesn't matter at all. And that always baffled me. And because the discussion is so huge, you kind of think they're actually discussing the aftermath, but they're not. They're still just discussing the terms of the divorce. The really, really difficult discussions will come afterwards. It being a Norway option, a Canada option, or most likely, or hopefully for UK, a UK option.
I think that Nils Arne Lindås can ask his question, and Joseph Winton can get himself ready.
Ærede Storsal, mitt navn Nils Arne, og jeg medlem. I think I'll take it in Norwegian. I'm not that good in English. Nå har Brexit fått ekstremt mye oppmerksomhet, og det har gjort at... og det jo et land, eller kanskje 4 land, som fortsatt skal drives i det daglige, har Brexit gått på bekostning av innenrikspolitikk, og har det gjort at det har blitt lettere å få gjennom saker som ellers ville vært veldig vanskelig å få gjennom, fordi politikere ikke vil miste popularitet, men at all fokuset på Brexit har gjort det mulig, og da gjør litt sånn upopulære valg.
Okay, so the Brexit has gotten a lot of attention. Has it gotten so much attention that many of the domestic cases has had an easier way through than it would have otherwise? And are politicians who would otherwise be scared to kind of lose the popularity not so scared at this moment because there are other cases on the table?
The answer to the first question is yes, of course. They use so much time on Brexit. So less time on NHS, less time on devolving issues, less time on everything. But you still need a majority in Parliament for getting other legislations through. That's how Parliament works. And they still have those discussions and those votes. But as I said in my introduction, listening to the news, reading any newspaper, you have to look for them, because everything is about Brexit.
Well, there is a worry about it. I mean, when I talk to friends in Britain, they say exactly the same. What happens to all the normal politics, the day-to-day? Have they got time for that at all? They can't give an answer, and I think Espen answered it quite well. But people are getting fed up as well, because they want things done, and it's now 2.5 years, or even more, and I mean, many people I talk to are worried that there are important things that won't have the time to be to get handled, you know.
But has it been more or less like a 2.5 year break in British politics, where we just didn't stand still in many domestic?
I think it certainly has dominated the media, and over the last 3 weeks or 6 weeks, or has started to dominate people's conversations. But it doesn't. It's still the normal business of government is going on. Every ministry is I don't want to say split into two, but it has a portion of the people handling Brexit advice and no deal preparations, and the rest of the ministry is doing the normal work. And in our own example, in the foreign ministry, clearly the Europe Directorate, a lot of what it is doing is based around trying to kind of get messages across on our Brexit position and to gather information about what's being said and done in the rest of Europe. Clearly that's the case, even for my own, the Norway desk. They're doing that too. But the whole of the rest of the ministry is doing Russia policy, security policy, it's doing Africa, it's liaising with the military, it is talking to our aid ministry about common initiatives, it's doing wildlife protection, it's doing all of the things that we were doing before. It's just that stuff is not getting the headlines. I mean, that's okay. The business is still happening, and clearly Brexit is dominating the news, but you shouldn't read into that normal government business is not happening. It is happening. Parliamentary time is limited to get laws through, obviously, but the business of government is still going on. You shouldn't assume that we're all sitting in front of the TV waiting for the next vote on Brexit.
But has the British media been capable of kind of addressing that problem and showing that there are a lot of things happening besides the Brexit, or Brexit is it all-encompassing and taking all the media time?
I mean, I totally get why for journalists this is a great show, right? I mean, this is something that's worth watching, endless reporting, the gift that keeps on giving. I totally understand that. And the fact that we are hosting a conference following Norway's on gender-based violence and stopping initiatives to stop gender-based violence in Africa, that's not going to make the news. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And maybe that stuff will start to come back in the news when we reach an agreement and move on. But it doesn't mean we should stop doing the work just because it's not making the headlines.
But if you take the website of the BBC, which I check in on at least once a day, they have quite a lot of other news as well. Yes, they have a lot of Brexit news, but I think it's a bit wrong to sort of blame the media for everything, because I have a feeling that, not a feeling, I know that, for instance, the BBC have a lot of other stories about British society and also about foreign news and all that. So it's a bit difficult to sort of have a black and white answer to it, because there are nuances.
And to a point of comparison, in Norwegian media, when Ole Gunnar Solskjær was appointed the manager of Manchester United, I remember reading I think it's the largest newspaper in Norway, VG, which had 8 articles about Ole Gunnar Solskjær's new life at Manchester, and then there was some huge political scandal. So we have no complaints on the British media, I think. I think Joseph Whittington can ask his question, and Tony back and make himself ready.
Honored Starsal, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Joseph, and I'm a member. I am also a British citizen and have been living in Norway since 1999, when I moved here with my parents, who are also British citizens. Now, back in 2016, when the UK voted for Brexit, I, quite understandably perhaps, was given no vote in that election, as I've never lived in England. My parents, on the other hand, who both lived there for at least 25 years, have lived in England and are EA citizens, and were also allowed no opportunity to vote. Why is that, when we were, directly affected, or might be directly affected by the outcome of that vote? I sent a message to my mum earlier, asking her if there were any questions she would like to ask you. And among the more colourful words she had about the British government, she managed to come up with quite a few questions, and one of them is, what will happen to us when any form of deal is reached, especially if there's a no-deal Brexit? Obviously, we hope that Norway will allow us to stay here, but, what are the scenarios that we can prepare ourselves for? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you have brought this to people, real people, and how it affects people, because I think that's a really important part of this. So thank you, Mum, for me. Has she got a? I suspect she's got an even stronger Geordie accent than yours. And tell her to give me a call. I'll have a chat with her. What happens to? Well, first of all, on the vote, the government supported giving votes to overseas voters. Parliament didn't support that view. It took the view that the majority of overseas voters are not in Europe, and so would be voting on an issue that didn't concern them. The majority of overseas voters are in Canada, Australia, South Africa, US. and other countries. So I think that was regrettable because it was an issue that directly affected people. But what's being done for people, I think that there is good news on that, and that is the one issue where we have found really strong agreement with the EU. I wish it had happened earlier. The UK suggested an immediate agreement to make a commitment to citizens that they could continue to live their lives as they already were. EU said no, it had to be part of the negotiations, but nevertheless, we now have with Norway, I think probably almost first amongst any country in the EEA, along with Iceland, we have an agreement both in the case of deal and no deal, that Norwegian citizens in the UK will be able to stay and British citizens in Norway will be able to stay and enjoy all of the same rights that they have today, access to healthcare, education, everything that they have today will stay the same. And as you know, from next year, there is going to be allowed dual citizenship in Norway as well, so they would also have that option. It was passed by Cabinet in Norway on Friday, and yesterday in fact, and is ready to come into effect should there be a no deal. If there is a deal, Norway simply gets the same deal as the EU. So I think the bases are covered. I haven't yet come across any situation. I've been going around the country talking to British citizens. I haven't come across any set of circumstances where people would be disadvantaged in their life in compared to what rights they have today, with one exception, which is those rights apply to Norway only. If you are living in Norway as a British citizen at the time of Brexit, then you maintain all of those rights in Norway. You won't have the right to go to any other EEA country and take up those rights. So that, I think, is the big exception. But to carry on daily life in Norway, there are agreements so that will happen.
To some extent, you mentioned in your opening remarks that there has kind of the market plummeting and the pound falling and stuff like that. How critical were the economical result of the Brexit vote in the immediate aftermath?
It was a few hours. I mean, I went to the City of London, as I said, and it was mainly in the opening hours of trading. You saw the pound falling, but it regained power. It's obviously much weaker. It's weaker now than it was before the vote, but it's still surprisingly strong. Not surprisingly, because the British economy is going very well. There's no big companies that have moved away from the United Kingdom yet. There's a lot of talk about it, and who knows, there might be a lot of financial services or manufacturing, I don't know, foreign-owned that might move on, but it depends on what happens, if there is a no deal, if there is a deal. But British economy, I mean, the Chancellor had his spring statement, was it last week? And he could tell a story about a very healthy economy still.
So financially speaking, I would assume that this insecurity, which has been for 2 years and 9 months, has that kind of dropped down the rates of investments, the ability to invest in your own companies, the domestic economic possibilities, because you don't know the rule book you'll be playing with for a few years ahead?
I mean, the evidence shows that there is some investment that is on hold. It's still planned for the UK, but hasn't been given the final go-ahead. But that actually investment hasn't dropped substantially since the referendum. People are still confident in the UK in a long-term future, and I think that's the kind of message I was trying to give. That we are in a kind of rocky period, but there is some optimism that the UK will adapt to whatever system is eventually decided on and take the economy forward. And if you look at the pound has actually come back up to levels almost before the referendum. I get paid in pounds and spend krona, which is a bad deal. You know, I've noticed, because I watch it every day, I've noticed that the rate continues to go up. The pound continues to strengthen. I think that possibility of a no-deal Brexit has been priced into the market in many ways. And the UK, looking at the figures for 2018, is still the second highest destination for foreign direct investment in the world, and that doesn't seem to be dropping. And I think there is a really welcome confidence in the long-term fundamentals of the economy.
One of the strengths and foundations of a kind of successful democracy is that the bad policies, if you lose an election, you can have consolidation in that. In a few years' time, you can turn it around. Policies will be reversed. There's always kind of this possibility that things won't be eternal. But the Brexit vote will, in many respects, be this generation's most lasting legacy. It will have an effect for decades to come. So if VK can show the picture number 2, and it kind of illustrates some of the problems with this being a political referendum when the political legacy will last for decades. Because that's quite frightening. And you can ask yourself, why do they kind of dare to put such an important question as a referendum to entire people when it has, as we talked about for a good amount of time now, so many difficult kind of possible consequences and stuff like that? How could we leave it to the normal man to do this? Isn't this why we have a parliament?
Well, the same parliament said we should ask the people. So they did. They're elected by the people, and they said we're going to ask the people. But I don't quite agree with what you say, because it all depends on what happens next. What kind of deal will there eventually be between the UK and the EU? It could turn out good. It might be rocky for a few years. We don't know that. But obviously, Britain has chosen, or the UK has chosen, a new path, which will mean that everyone living in the UK will most likely be on the outside of the EU. What that will mean in the long run, we don't know.
I think it's quite sad to look at many of the things that has happened and that it's developed into chaos in many ways. But at the same time, you know, as Richard says, British economy is still strong. And Britain has been a strong country for centuries. And it's been in the EU for, is it 45 years? So, I mean, if you take the long perspective, maybe this is only a little detour into it. I can't be that pessimistic that I think that there'll be a lasting legacy of bad things after Brexit, whatever the outcome now, even if there's a no deal. I think that's too pessimistic, and I think that, I mean, the British have been good at finding solutions. At some time you were. I think you haven't been that good this time, but there'll be times to come, and there'll be possibilities to make this work better than it does now.
I think then we can get the question from Tony Buck, and Katrine Stormy can get herself ready.
Ærede Storsal, Mr. Ambassador, my name is Tony, and I'm a member. So I have, this is 2.8. It's one observation and one question. So one observation I made in the beginning of this session was how many of us here in this Grand Assembly who voted that Brexit was a bad idea. So one observation then would be, a question would be, how many of us would like to join the EU as Norwegians? That is also food for thought. And maybe a more like as a political science question, what would the implication of a new referendum be for British democracy? In my mind, it opens a Pandora's box, if you like, because every time you disagree with something, there will be sort of like a bad Switzerland. You can just make a new referendum, a referendum, and so on. And how big would the majority need to be for this new referendum? Yeah, that's my question.
And even what would the question be?
Yeah.
Would the question be the same as the old one? Should we leave or stay? Or in that case, it would be reverse the previous referendum or keep it? Or would it be leave, remain, some kind of deal? Would there be several options? Would it be a choice between two different kinds of Brexit, for example. So I think even formulating a question for the referendum would be nightmarishly political, because it would be fundamentally one disagreeing with the first one. There isn't more evidence available now than there was before the first referendum. All the information is the same about what the EU is, the way it works, what benefits the UK had from the EU, and what the drawbacks were in some people's views. So all that information is the same. That hasn't changed. So there's not a new case to answer. It's still the same question on the same issue. So I think it would be problematic to ask the question again. But should we have referenda on those kinds of big constitutional issues? I think that's becoming a trend in many places now. Switzerland has a referendum every other Sunday, I think, and
in Ireland they've had
in Ireland they've had several. We started a trend with the Scotland referendum, giving the answer to the people to decide the biggest constitutional questions facing the country, and that's Norway has done the same thing. Of course, should Norway join the European Union?
I think if you have referendums on big constitutional questions like this one, like Scotland, you have to have clear alternatives. And if you can see a scenario where you have several options to vote on, that would be hopeless. 28%, 20%, 23%. I mean, if you had like 4 different options, it couldn't be like that. And the difficult thing now, I think, is that when it's so close, 51.9 and 48.1 or whatever it was, that is what makes it really difficult. Because if it had been like in Scotland, 55-45, it might not have been as easy for the hundreds, thousands of people who are in London tonight to say that we want a new referendum. But because it's so close, it's always a difficulty. But I mean, Theresa May has said 17.4 million people voted for us to go out of the EU. That's quite a lot of people. Yeah. And to tell them that we didn't like what you did, so we'll do it again. That is difficult for any politician or any person at all.
And so many people decided not to vote, and obviously afterwards thought that was a bad idea. Well, too bad. You didn't vote, and you can't turn that around. And well, say if you want to have a new referendum, should you then have different rules for that referendum, saying, well, this time around we would need 2/3, 3 out of 4. No, you can't argue for that either. So, no, it should say, of course, if Parliament decides there should be a second referendum, then it was a great idea.
That's your job.
Then we come to the last guest questionnaire for the night. But I would just like to say that we can see in the statistics that we're almost every single time 60% girls or women here. And today we had 8 men ask a question, and finally we have a woman. So I don't know if you need to applaud that or what we want to do, but more of you have to engage. But that was mine, yeah.
Okay, dear great hall, my name is Katrine, and I am a member. So we have talked a lot about the fact that we don't know what the outcome of the Brexit will, or a Brexit will be. But if you look to Ireland and Northern Ireland, because we haven't been talking a lot about those countries yet, we've seen that people are afraid of what will happen because, for instance, people work in the different countries. They travel across the border every day. Also, Ireland and Northern Ireland share a strong history and also in some way a culture. So what I would like to ask is, how do you think a Brexit will affect the relationship between Ireland and Northern Ireland? Thank you.
Well, Richard, I'm sure you're thrilled to answer that.
Yeah, oh, you'd love to answer that,
wouldn't you? I'd love to answer that question. Listen, I think that Ireland and Northern Ireland and
the Great Britain relationship there. I mean, there has been that's a kind of unique process that doesn't really exist in the same format anywhere else, and therefore it needs a unique solution. And I think the British government has said time and again it wants a solution to all of this which guarantees absolutely rock solidly the Good Friday Agreement on the future of Northern Ireland, which includes an element of the cross-border economy, which is vital to that area. Economic growth was seen as the real driver of making peace hold in the Northern Ireland border areas. So we are absolutely committed to making sure that whatever happens, Brexit deal or Brexit no deal, that Good Friday Agreement, it continues to be as strong as it has. And if you go to Belfast now compared to, as we were saying, Belfast 20 years ago, there is absolutely no comparison. It is an economically booming city. Citibank just set up a massive headquarters in Belfast, just as an example. There are huge benefits that have come to the whole community after the Good Friday Agreement, and we are determined that they should stay the same. Ireland, I can't speak for Ireland, of course, but they have said, as far as I know, that they share that objective as well, that the Good Friday Agreement should be maintained and strengthened and all the aspects of it carried on. We've said we will maintain the common travel area, so there'll be no people checks between Ireland and Northern Ireland, come what may. We've said that we need to maintain a single electricity market. We've said that we need to maintain that cross-border economy. And so Ireland and the UK share the same objectives over that border area, and therefore I really believe that it shouldn't be impossible to find a solution which strengthens the economy further, allows Ireland to be safe within the European Union and Northern Ireland to be safe within the United Kingdom. I really believe that's possible.
Would it be like that if there was a no deal?
Again, both countries have said they have an absolute determination not to go back to the borders of the past in the case of a no deal. So we would simply just need to talk to each other about how to maintain that. And Ireland, of course, needs to talk to the European Union because it doesn't have a direct say in how the European EU's customs code, for example, is applied at the border. So they would need to get some latitude from the Commission about how some of those rules are applied in recognition of that unique situation.
And I think that's the most exciting thing, whatever they will choose there, because they have to make another choice for the border between Britain and Ireland than they've done anywhere else, because it's a complete new situation. So it has to be a Lex Brexit kind of border, I suppose. But as well as Ireland and the UK, the EU has also said we need to keep that border open. So nobody said we want a closed border. I met people who think that would be a good idea, but they have other political opinions as well, and they're not in any parliament, but there we are.
I think we'll actually end it there, and I'll give my thanks to you and my word back to Eirik.
Okay, thank you to our speaker. Yeah. Thank you to both our guests and everyone who asked questions. That round of applause was to all of you. Moving on, after being elected as the new leader for Samfundet on February 27th, Frida Jerve has worked hard on selecting her new board. Today we are lucky to meet the board for the very first time, and as we wait for them to introduce themselves, Eivind, who has been up at the podium quite a few times today already, will give a brief orientation about what we're going to do today. In Norwegian, I think.
Ja, nå jeg her som da rådets møtevakt og nestleder, og opprinnelig så stod det jo presentasjon av styret. Det jo slik at Storsalen og Samfundsmøte velger en leder. og lederen plukker opp et styre som da minimum må ha 6 medlemmer, og disse må godkjennes av Samfundsmøtet. Så det jo slik at det å godkjenne jo også en slags form for vedtak. Og der jo utfordringen at styret ikke hadde oppført denne posten, hverken under titelen godkjenning, altså bare som presentasjon, og heller ikke da hadde oppført dette innen tidsfristen før møtet. Derfor så kan vi ikke formelt, sånn vi har tolket det nå i kveld, gjennomføre godkjenningen i kveld, men presentasjon og utspørring av styrets medlemmer skal selvsagt finne sted, og det uproblematisk. Det betyr, ærede storsal, at man på et annet møte må gjennomføre selve godkjenningen som et formalvedtak. Det har da riktig nok de senere år ikke vært noen problemer tilknyttet selve godkjennelsesprosessen, og de fleste styrer har blitt godkjent ved akklamasjon. Og det jo også slik at i utgangspunktet det jo litt en for alle for en som greia med styre og leder, sånn samfunnet har en kutyme for. Men altså selve godkjenningen må skje på et annet møte. Det var orienteringen.
Ærede storsal, mitt navn Frida, og jeg medlem. Jeg også påtroppende leder her på Samfunnet. Denne uken har vært ganske spesiell for Samfunnet. Vi har valgt en ny president for ISFIT 2021. Vi har vært i velferdstinget og blitt lovet penger til nybygg. Og for meg så har det vært mye jobb med å ta opp et nytt styre. Så det en enorm glede at jeg har lyst til å introdusere dere for 8 mennesker som har sagt ja til å bruke det neste året på å gjøre Studentersamfunnet så bra som mulig. De dyktige mennesker, de medlemmer, og de ikke nazister. Det står i våre lover, og det gjelder også alle medlemmer, ikke bare styremedlemmer. Så det viktig å huske på. Det 8 mennesker jeg tar opp, men 3 av de kan ikke være her i dag, så derfor skal jeg presentere de for dere. Hvis vi får de på skjerm. Det første mennesket, det Ida Maria Alme. Hun 21 år, fra Bergen, og studerer statsvitenskap. Jeg har lyst til å ha henne som min kommunikasjonsansvarlig. Bildet i midten Jakob Drage Roti. Han også 21 år, fra Oslo, og studerer ingeniørvitenskap og IKT. Jeg har lyst til å ha han som min arrangementsansvarlig, det som tidligere kjent som intern arrangementsansvarlig. Og til sist så har vi Petter Jakobsen. Han fra Larvik, 22 år gammel, og studerer kybernetikk og robotikk. Jeg ønsker meg han som min nestleder. Nå skal dere få møte de andre.
Hei, hallo. Ærede storsal. Mitt navn Lars, og jeg medlem. Jeg også 23 år og kommer fra Sørumsand i Akershus. Jeg studerer statsvitenskap og ønsker å bli PR- og temaansvarlig. Takk.
Ærede storsal, jeg heter Inga, og jeg medlem. Jeg 24 år, jeg kommer fra Hamar, og jeg studerer psykologi. Jeg ønsker å bli temaansvarlig.
Ærede storsal, mitt navn Helle, og jeg medlem. Jeg 22 år, fra Malvik, og ønsker nå å gå inn i styret som huskoordinator.
Ærede storsal, mitt navn Karin Mjør, og jeg medlem. Jeg også 23 år gammel, jeg kommer fra Stord og studerer på lektorprogrammet i samfunnsfag. Og jeg ønsker å bli ansvarlig for styrets debattkomité. Takk.
Ærede storsal, mitt navn Kevin, jeg medlem, 22 år gammel og studerer datateknologi. Jeg ønsker å bli det nye økonomiansvarlig.
is there anyone who has questions to any specific board member or board in total? Okay, then we'll come back to the confirmation as soon as possible. Thank you to Frida and her new board. You have a lot to look forward to. Give them a huge round of applause. We will now move on to any other business. Is there anyone who wants to express themselves here?
Det er Storsal. Mitt navn er Sigrid, og jeg er medlem. Jeg vil på vegne av styret informere om at på generalforsamlingen så tenker vi å presentere forslag til livsvarige medlemmer og æresmedlemmer. I den prosessen med å finne livsvarige medlemmer og æresmedlemmer til Studentersamfunnet i Trondheim, så trenger vi hjelp fra dere. Så vi ønsker at hvis dere tenker ut noen som burde vært livsvarig medlem, og da har gjort en særdeles innsats for Studentersamfunnet, eller noen som kan bli æresmedlem, altså da gjort noe som har en sånn karakter at vi burde ha det knyttet de til vår organisasjon, så send oss en mail til styre@samfunnet.no innen 5. april. Så skal vi ta en vurdering på de nominasjonene vi får inn, og komme tilbake til dere på generalforsamlingen. Så jeg håper at dere setter dere litt i tenkeboksen og gir oss noen gode kandidater til livsvarig og æresmedlemmer. Takk.
Ærede Storsal, I'll do this in English. My name is Per Christian Berget. I'm also running for the NTNU Board of Directors, like Sigrid. But I'm a member. But I'm not here to tell you to vote for me. I'm just here to tell you to vote. Because I'm also a faculty representative, and I've been in student democracy at NTNU for some time now. Statistically, a lot of you are NTNU students. And we're blessed in Norway and at NTNU with the right for students to be represented at every single level in the university, to make sure that we have a say in how our university is run. We're also cursed with an abysmal voter turnout. I imagine a lot of you are thinking, well, I didn't vote last semester right now. And I understand that, because it's hard to reach through to all our students. We are 42,000 students at the university. It's hard to reach through Samfundet, all the linjeforenings, all these things to tell you that you have a kind of democratic obligation to vote. But, like Sigrid said, from the 2nd of April to the 11th of April, the students' elections are happening everywhere at NTNU. You're electing your representatives at department level, at faculty level, and your 2 students' representatives for the NTNU Board of Directors. And I implore you, please use your vote. Every single student at NTNU has the right to vote. Use your vote, tell your friends to vote, go to studentvalget.no and vote. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matilde, and I am the president of ISFIT. And I just want to inform that I'm going to recruit a vice president, or maybe 2. So if you want to have a chat about that position, please contact me. Yes, thank you.
Seeing as there are no further speeches on any other business, moving forward, is there anyone who would like to give feedback to the meeting?
Usually when closing the speakers list, it's been previously, at least when I've been here, it's been done during a question, leaving a minute for other people to still sign themselves up on the list. That was not done today. It was closed immediately, and I know at least one person did not get to ask their question because of it, and I imagine a few others went unspoken. So I would please request that in the future, the list be left open for a minute or 2 after it's said to be closed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Cool. Before finishing up, I'd like to remind everyone that on Wednesday, the debate committee are putting on a debate about the hazard surrounding Nidelva, who is responsible, and what we should do. And that will be in Klubben on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. And after this, there will be a political after-party in Selskapstiden through that door right there, where it will also be possible to buy Annette's and Espen's books. Yeah, I want to thank the following for helping us make this meeting come together. Annette Groth, Espen Aas, Ambassador Richard Wood, everyone who asked questions, the newly elected board, Forsterkerkomiteen, Regi, Videokomiteen, Studentmediene, Markedsføringsgjengen, ITK, Rådet, Lørdagskomiteen, Fotogjengen, the security guards, and Café- og serveringsgjengen. The meeting is adjourned.